I'm going to pass around this photo of my sisters and cousins and I for all of you to see while I begin here. Thank you so much for having me. Some of you may remember me from coming here to do some singing in the past, but when I got the opportunity to be here today and to speak a little bit on my story and my background and some of my perspectives, it was a real honor, so thank you. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. James Baldwin. From the Ubuntu philosophy, I am because you are because I am. I was born to a single mother in 1986. I have never known my biological African-American father. As a child, I grew up with a mother in various apartments, living check to check on Social Security, with a little bit of support from my grandparents. My mom never had a job due to her mental health. I was homeschooled and unschooled until I was 9, and this meant that I was educated in a very unconditional way. I was raised to be street smart and very untrusting of men. My mother is white, my family is white, and obviously I'm not, so that's had a huge impact on my identity and on my experience growing up. Growing up, not being in school meant that I had a lot of free time to do make-believing. So I used creativity as an escape from what could have been perceived as a very hard reality. At that time, my mom spent almost all of her days indoors without the sunlight being able to come in. She had strong beliefs and superstitions about what the sun meant. So going to the park and going to the beach were really, really rare for me. People always wondered, what is this light-skinned white woman doing walking around with this little black child covered head to toe in scarves and hats. So we were a target of bullies, both her and I. I'm very grateful for these odd experiences I had growing up that shaped me, but it also meant that I was desperately seeking connection with other kids, and I was looking for normalcy that I just didn't have. I looked forward to kids getting home from school and summer break getting out, even though I wasn't in school myself. I just wanted to connect with other kids because that's what was missing. Things like walking far distances in the dead of winter, getting food at local food pantries, and seeing my mom be bullied for not being normal or for being white in an all-black neighborhood, or for me being black but not black enough, or for being light-skinned but not light enough. Seeing the aftermath of her being battered by an abuser and being temporarily homeless, these are all things that marked my memories as a child. The otherness of my upbringings consistently intersecting with the otherness that I felt in the world, experiencing colorism, tokenism, sexism, ableism, and countless other microaggressions long before I could even define what those terms meant or what a trigger is. As a black woman, I would come to know what all these terms meant very well. And I would look out into the world and see people experiencing similar things. It's important to acknowledge the background of my mother because she's had such an interesting role in my life and how I orient myself in the world. Same is to be said about my African-American biological father, who I've literally never met. My mom is a very unique woman. She's the oldest of 7 and was raised in a CRC home. She ran away at a young age because she didn't want to deal with the conventionalities of her environment. I think that she's a quiet rebel. In her mid-20s, she ran away from home, which inspired that song as well as my own experience, and then eventually became pregnant with my oldest sister and then my 2 other half-sisters. Due to my mother's mental health and choices, my sisters were taken away by social services when they were 7, 11, and 17 months old. They lived anywhere between Miami and California and West Michigan, but ultimately my mom was deemed an unfit mother. They were eventually adopted into my family's homes, after which, 3 years later, I am born in Grand Rapids. From 0 to 9, my mother and I lived in West Michigan, anywhere from 8 blocks to 3 miles away from where my whole family and sisters lived with my aunt and uncle. This reality plagued my daily life because due to the relationship my family had with my mom, and by extension, I wasn't able to spend time with my sisters. This relationship with my mother and family is that of resentment, long-held pains, grudges, and animosity. Compound this with the fact that I'm the only child my mother has who is also black. I'm poor, and I rarely have anybody with mental stability around to provide love, care, and support. Needless to say, my concept of family is very disrupted, unique, and often polarized. I grew up feeling that I didn't make the cut in the real family, a family that has a mom and dad, a family where people sit down to have meals. I think of that James Baldwin quote, that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing that can be changed until it's faced. It brings to light the fact that no matter what a reality appears, until we in fact acknowledge said reality, we won't be able to do anything about it. My personal experience has meant doing one of the hardest things I could think of, which is standing in front of all of you today, many of whom are strangers, and telling you some of the most deep, personal things about my life, the regret and trauma and very hard to swallow truths of my past. What got me through this difficult reality, I'm certain, had to have been music. It had to have been dancing. It had to have been seeing brilliant people expressing themselves and looking happy doing it, especially when those individuals look like me. That inspired me. As a kid, I had a playfulness and a mentality of make-believing. While at times it might have seemed delusional, it gave me a healthy sense that if I could think of something big and grandiose and fantastic, it could be mine. So I pretended until I was 9. And then my mom got pressure from family in the state to put me in school because the homeschooling bit really wasn't landing anymore. So she decided to pack up a few of our things, leave our apartment, and take us on a cross-country trip from Grand Rapids to East LA that took 4 days on this Greyhound bus. It was rough. From here, we lived in hotels and that were semi-permanent in nature, month-to-month situations. We were still poor, and now we were even farther away from family support. We were essentially in hiding. This didn't stop the state from coming and saying, you gotta put the kid in school. So she finally did it, really because I said, I don't want to be taken away, and I'm ready to go to school, even though I don't feel very prepared. The task of getting myself to school every day, getting my clothes together, feeding myself, and doing my homework was really hard. I didn't have that support, but I made it through. My friends in my community were mostly Latinx, undocumented poor kids who taught me Spanish and taught me about family and food, and they taught me more about being street smart. I lived in what seemed like was the epicenter of where the 18th Street gang operated. Lots of homelessness, drug use, and crime were always in earshot. Now entering the stage of puberty with a new insight into the world and being mature beyond my age, I started to get really homesick. I started to connect with my sister who's right above me over the phone against my mom's will to begin a plan to come home for a visit. Now, I didn't know what all this was going to mean, but I didn't say goodbye to my mother, and I really had no clue what I was getting myself into. I packed up all my stuff into a black trash bag, left my friend Juanita's house, and got picked up by my 23-year-old sister and her 26-year-old boyfriend, and got on a plane back to Michigan, thinking that this would be a summer trip, and finding out at the end of the summer that this was my new permanent relocation. I had to quickly adjust and adapt to the reality that I would no longer live with my mom, and that I would have to adapt to a whole new experience of living, going to a Christian school, experiencing what I guess you could call some normalcy. All of this took a huge emotional toll. I have a new life. I'm living a quintessential teenage life. But looking back, I realized that I never came to terms with the dramatic changes. I've never been comfortable with the fact that my existence was that of a person who existed as black, but was still feeling very invisible to so many other people in so many ways. The realities of my past made people who know me uncomfortable, so it was easier to adapt and assimilate and into a culture where only a handful of kids could even fathom what I had gone through. I had to be grateful and I had to be gracious when at times I felt rage because I did not feel understood. I internalized my anger and frustration and turned into a teenage boy crazy, overly self-conscious, hyper-extroverted, eager to please everyone type of young lady. But I was still dealing with the fact that in order to fit in, which is what I needed to do at my Christian high school, I had to kind of just pretend that things were all right. Well, those suppressed emotions would come out eventually. I had love and beauty and a joy to share with the world through communication and words and song, but I didn't know how to get my balance in it all without fully investigating my ancestors' history and the narratives that continue to be told today. There was so much more to this story of my ancestors, both black and white, that I needed to unwrap. Through music, I was able to unpack the story of being black and white and being American. Through music, I was able to connect with my ancestry. It wasn't only about the brutal stories of slavery and police brutalities. It was also about joy and love and unadulterated freedom. I loved that. My appreciation for music, specifically the music of artists such as Nina Simone, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Marvin Gaye, Bob Marley, Eartha Kitt, and the like, helped me to connect to this magical place where communication and unity and a message of equality and freedom could be shared through the power of song. Through music, I was able to connect with my ancestors whose sonic memory lives on. The urgency and fleetingness of a song is a metaphor for the urgency and fleetingness of time, I think. In one sense, Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, and in another, it's as though it happened just yesterday. When Nina Simone wrote the song, "Why is the King of Love Dead?" she knew that those words would truly be heard by those who understood the tragic answer to this question, that racism was and is alive and well. Martin Luther King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere." I think that is so true. In the case of racism in all of its forms, we must acknowledge it at the root. The words of late Toni Morrison speak to this and was said earlier. This is a very serious function of racism, is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. We all have so much work to do. This leads me to say that we cannot continue on today without honoring and acknowledging the work and contributions of Black and brown people by not only telling their stories and sharing their artwork, but by continuing their work with them. We have let racism become this mysterious phantom instead of calling it what it is, a product of white supremacy, of greed and fear and self-hate, coming from a place of scarcity. But don't we have enough? The collective memory that we share must also be acknowledged. Generational trauma is something every single human being has to deal with, and the Black community is no stranger to this. We're also no stranger into turning trauma into art, but we have to be careful about this because Black suffering has also become commonplace in our culture as a form of entertainment. We see this with the now common and necessary filming of police brutality and the viral videos of Black suffering in the headlines on a regular basis. We have so much more to offer the world than an HD view into our sabotage and suffering. This is a part of our consciousness and memory on a biological level. Professor Christy Dotson of Michigan State University says that our memory is longer than our lifespan. If this is true, we are all dealing with racial trauma of our forefathers and mothers past. Time alone doesn't heal the trauma, but action reconciliation, reparations, and actively change systems of oppression, and love heal trauma. But how long will we wait? And whose time is it? In Brittany Cooper's 2016 TED Talk, she discusses the radical politics of time, where she discusses the reality that Black Lives Matter protests go to a protest and they see these unjust killings of Black citizens, and the pictures that emerge from this protest look like they could have been taken 50 years ago. We have a long, long way to go. She says those in power dictate the pace of the workday. They dictate how much money our time is worth. George Lipsity argues that white people even dictate the pace of social inclusion. They dictate how long it will actually take for minority groups to receive the rights they've been fighting for. Brittany Cooper also says that when she thinks of the civil rights movements and the cries of its leaders for freedom now, they were pushing up against an extremely slow pace of white social inclusion. By 1965, the year the Voting Rights Act was passed, between the end of the Civil War and the conferral of voting rights on African American communities. In 2016, the federal court struck down North Carolina's voter ID law, saying it, quote, targeted African Americans with surgical precision, restricting African American inclusion in the body politic is a primary way that we attempt to manage and control people by managing and controlling their time, end quote. These are just a few examples in which justice in all of its forms seems to be kicked down the road through these racist agendas, through racist policymaking. We as citizens and allies have a very real opportunity to change these systems. Anything from housing to education to health to the criminal justice system. We need restorative justice now. We needed it yesterday. And we need action to change these paradigms. Ta-Nehisi Coates says that the defining feature of being drafted into the Black race is the inescapable robbery of time, the robbed moments of joy that we experience. Our precious time is lost being caught in the time-sucking distraction that is racism, every single one of us. The only way to change something is to address the system in which it functions. We must be intolerant to intolerance. Professor Shannon Holland asked, what happens to a person who exists in time, who meets someone who only occupies space? That's a really good question to be asking. That's the thing about time, and that's the thing about our memory. We recollect and experience things based on what's convenient for us. But everything we experience collectively is stored in the whole body, I believe. How to be gritty in terms of social justice is being consistent and being committed to dismantling these systems of oppression. This means we have to curve our default setting of being selectively outraged. If every life matters, then we have to show up and put into action that Black lives do matter, that LGBTQIA lives matter, that disabled bodies' lives matter, that indigenous lives matter, that everyone is valuable, and space and time are meaningful for all. Malcolm X said, you can't separate peace and freedom because no one can be at peace unless they have their freedom. I think to be an ally in this world and to practice this Ubuntu philosophy, we must hold space and take action and honor the contributions of every person. Remember, Ubuntu means I am because you are. You are because I am. So I've been fortunate to say the least, that it wouldn't be possible to arrive where I am today without people, allies, without Ubuntu, without the idea that I am somehow valuable enough to be loved and protected and nurtured, and that my existence really matters. In my life, I've had music and I've had some key allies. I've found family everywhere, but by no means wholly or completely, but I'm grateful for the one that I have. Those songs and those people carried me through. People like Tony Bush at Christian High, who ran the jazz band program and sought me out to sing, "What you want, baby, I got. What you need, do you know I got it? All I'm asking is for a little respect when you get home. Yeah, baby, when you get home." Okay? Right. But it's people like that who saw my talent and didn't say, "Oh, you have a reading disability. You know, you're not academic. You can't do this." People like that. People like my Aunt Kathy, who were there when I was born because my mom refused to go to a hospital. My 14-year-old sister Rose calling me to make sure that I was safe while I was in L.A. My grandfather walking me through his beautiful garden and sitting me down at his amazing Steinway piano, and kicking my mom's abusive boyfriend out of our house. My sister, Karina, and my brother-in-law, Corey, who raised me through my teens while they were very young themselves. They made countless sacrifices so that I could reach adulthood with a fair shot. My best friend, Marcus, my brother, black, gay, we fight through every single part of our lives together with really beautiful conversations that uplift each other. My husband, Scott, who has always encouraged my abilities, celebrates my strengths, and loves me unconditionally, even though I'm super emotional and super passionate about what I'm passionate about. He always makes space for me to be who I am. All of the educators and teachers who have been there, who've been my ally, regardless of our blood relationship. The only way to change something is to address the system in which it functions. I could have fallen through the cracks so many times, but people pulled me through to see that I could be helped and space could be made for me. Our collective past, present, matter, and our future will be determined by the path we take to help others along the way. I am because you are. Habits are formed by the systems we put in place. We have gotten into the habit of thinking and behaving as if these systems of oppression and intolerance and white supremacy are systems that we, in fact, are working to dismantle. I'm not fully convinced. As insurmountable as these complex systems seem to be to undo, if we believe that we are all, in fact, one, then we have to commit to changing the world wrought with hate and fill it with love. How intolerant are you of intolerance? How will you be an ally with the sense that time is of the essence? Nelson Mandela said in 2016, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or water. Once he stops, the people give him food and entertain him. That's one aspect of Ubuntu, but we'll have various. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to improve? Advocate E. Flippen Jr., advocate of justice and grassroots organizer, said, when we act upon deeply feeling a sense of being connected to others by our common humanity, when we truly regard self and other as one, when we cherish human dignity, all of our relationships and the level of our behaviors and actions are raised to a higher plane. When we understand and practice Ubuntu, we will realize that each has a vital role to play, which is that we must be holding in balance, no one dominating the other. We must break the walls down, build the body up, bring the people together. In the words of the late and wonderful Maya Angelou, she says simply, love liberates. For me, that reads, love is peace. There is no freedom without peace, and there is no peace without love. Therefore, love liberates. And that is a perfect and simple phrase to remember, that we all have the ability to set someone free by loving them unconditionally. Power to the people. Thank you.